Hi, friends. Welcome to Igniting Imagination. I'm your host, Lisa Greenwood, and I'm so excited to be back with you today with my co host, the Reverend Dr. Amy Butler, to continue our series exploring new models of ministry that are healing the world. Amy, thank you for joining us this season. It is really great to do this with you.
I'm having such a great time, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
We're meeting such great people. Isn't this
That's the
fun?
thing. It's like so much hope. I love it.
Yes, yes. And you have introduced us to these folks, and we're very excited. So, if you all haven't had a chance to listen to our previous episodes yet, I hope that you'll go back and listen. We are talking to some of the fellows from Invested Faith, the organization that Amy co founded and leads. These are spiritual entrepreneurs whose love for people leads them to innovate. As Kenda Creasy Dean says, they love people so well, they cannot help but innovate out of that love so that they do whatever they can to make people's lives better. The people who are in their context, whom God has given them to love. And I can't think of a better example than today's guest, Beverly Jenkins. So I'm really excited for you all to hear our conversation with Beverly. But before we go there, Amy, I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
So I know that St. Louis, which is where Beverly serves, at least in the area, is also the location where a congregation has made the decision to invest with Invested Faith. And I wonder if you might just tell us that story and walk us through the opportunity that you are giving congregations who are, at a pivot point and are discerning what their legacy will be. So, how does Invested Faith work for these congregations and with these congregations to support the new thing that God is doing in the world through these entrepreneurs? Connect the dots for us.
Lisa, I really thank you for this question because this is a beautiful story that is multi-layered and kind of hard to access. So here's what happened. I got a call from a pastor in St. Louis, pastor of St. Peter's United Church of Christ, diminishing in congregation members, as many of our churches are, but very, very wealthy in terms of assets. They own the largest cemetery in the St. Louis area. And because of the people who came before them, have the stewardship of a very large amount of money. So we began talking about ways in which they could move beyond the resource center that they'd built and renovating their sanctuary and making services available to the community. And I started talking about Invested Faith, about the idea that God invites us to throw seeds all over the place. And like many churches, they were like, well, we have this money and we want it to stay here in St. Louis. And a big part of Invested Faith's idea is we don't put limits on where God works. And we understand the interconnectedness of us all. So we want to invite you to be part of funding fellows across the entire country. So that was a hard idea for them to get their mind around. We started looking for fellows in St. Louis so that they could see the models. So we, for example, identified New Roots Urban Farm, which is right downtown, and the church got familiar with this model of social enterprise as part of faith witness. And we now actually have 7 fellows in St. Louis, and this church has made a $1 million gift to begin our fund. One of the things that happened that I did not expect is the renewed life at St. Peter's because their vision changed. They started looking around at the various community projects going on and seeing those community projects as church, and not only as church, as an extension of their witness at St. Peter.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
they understood, that this is so much bigger than just this little area. And so, you know, they are the ones who came to me and said, just about a mile up the street, across the street from our church, there's this amazing place called R&R Marketplace. You should check it out. So they have become now are partners in identifying invested faith fellows, and that's how I met Beverly. And
Nice.
it's
Are in our marketplace, and we'll hear more about it.
it's such
Yeah.
a great story of how even with diminished numbers, churches can be so impactful in changing their communities and communities beyond where they're located.
Yeah. So $1 million is not nothing. How did this church have that? Like what how did that come to be for this particular church?
This church was founded by German immigrants and because of white flight had moved several times. And the last time the church considered moving, they decided, no, we're going to stay right where we are. And part of the reason was that they happened to own the largest cemetery in
Mm,
urban St. Louis. And so that is, I mean, cemeteries are a great investment because they're always needed, and that produces quite a lot of income for the church. And in addition to the resources that the people who have gone before them had left for them, the church stewards millions and millions of dollars. And I think it became scary, like this is a big responsibility. And
mm.
so when I first met Patrick Chandler, their pastor, and he told me about this, and then he told me that Michael Brown is buried in the cemetery that is owned by their church, I could just feel like God saying, wake up, there's something here. There's something redemptive here. And it has become that in St. Louis, the, the most unlikely of places. It's so beautiful to watch.
Yeah, that's a poignant story because, some congregations hang on to those dollars until they have used every penny on keeping themselves on preserving and keeping themselves alive. And I'm hearing that this congregation had a felt the weight of calling and responsibility and impact um, and decided to reinvest in the kind of the future witness of the church, if you will, through invested faith.
Someone told me once, Lisa, that an endowment can either be the embalming fluid of an
Mm.
institution or the spark of the future. There's no in between. And
Wow.
I have seen St. Peter's live that, and I want
Mm.
it so much for other churches who have all these assets.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's a really powerful story. Thanks for sharing that, Amy. I
Hmm.
appreciate that.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a great setup for our conversation today. And as we have mentioned, our guest is Beverly Jenkins. So, Amy, will you share a little bit about Beverly?
Sure. Um, One of the things I like to say about Beverly is you will never encounter her and not be changed by the way she looks at the world, and you'll have that experience when you listen to our conversation. Beverly is the founder and ordained pastor, and she's an an innovator in the St. Louis community. She's the president and CEO of Refuge and Restoration R&R Marketplace and co-pastor with her husband of R&R Church in Delwood, Missouri, as she explained, is in the middle of Ferguson, Missouri. So they originally began there starting a transitional housing program for returning citizens. That grew to programs to helping people who were experiencing homelessness, unemployment, um, etc. They've now added a career center, the church, the marketplace. You'll hear her describe their five pillar approach to a over $20 million investment in that community. It's a huge 90,000 square foot hub of goodness in the middle of what looks like desolation. There's an addiction treatment facility there, a pharmacy, an early childhood education center, a bank, a restaurant, and soon to be a performing arts center and a community garden. And she is just an incredible um, innovator who is not afraid to just go and do it. And you're going to hear her talk about that.
Great. And I want to add that Beverly is a 2025 Lock Innovative Leader Award recipient, and we're so thrilled to welcome Beverly into the Lock Leader community. She's already begun to change and shape us with her witness, and we're so excited about that. That's just how that happens, right?
Doesn't
Yeah,
surprise me. That's beautiful.
yeah. So, Amy, what stood out to you about the conversation with Beverly?
Mm. One of the things I always feel pastored when I'm talking to Beverly. I'm
Mm,
con convicted to change the lens through which I see the world. And you'll hear her talk about the church with such optimism and hope that I often do not feel. Um,
mm,
I think a lot about decline and what are we going to do next and how are we going to take care of washing the windows and the carpet needs to be replaced and the money and the budget. And she says what the church is the biggest deployment center that we have. Oh my gosh, I'm going to be thinking about that for weeks.
yeah, yeah. And it strikes me that the church is, and being the church, like really being the church, is in her bones. She doesn't talk about being the pastor of the church or leading the church. No, it's just when she starts to talk about what she's doing, before you know it, she's talking about the church, because that is who she is. That is how she shows up in the world. And so yeah, I think it's sort of a lens shaper. How
Yeah.
she talks about the church. And then the other thing that stood out to me is you'll hear different points along the way where she says things like, "Well, it starts with the people."
Yeah.
And she'll talk about a conversation here or a conversation there and this group of people, and so right there, it starts with people. Doesn't
Yes.
everything start with people
Yes.
and those relationships and those conversations? And um,
And what
I
would
heard that all
happen if we opened our eyes to look around at all the goodness that
the
God is
time.
creating and then just
Yeah.
went there and did it?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
She's gonna
Yeah.
inspire us to keep going.
Yes, for sure. Let's listen to our conversation with Beverly. Hi, Beverly. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, I'm looking forward to this. So, we're going to jump right in, and I would love for you to tell us about your organization, Refuge and Restoration. And you can give us a little bit of the history. And I know it's been through a couple of iterations. So, you might just touch on sort of the um, hmm, key moments in the life of R&R.
Okay. There's a lot of them. Refuge and Restoration is a nonprofit. It's located here in Missouri. And so we're in St. Louis, specifically Dalewood, Missouri. That's right in the, I guess, vicinity of like Ferguson, Missouri, if we're pinpointing on a map. And so we're in the heart of that area. And so we started our nonprofit in 1999. And we started that nonprofit as a transitional housing for men who had come out of incarceration who were looking to restart their lives. And so that's where our beginnings were, and then we transitioned into family counseling, ACT prep for young people, all kinds of things kind of fell under that nonprofit umbrella for us. And then fast forward to about 2014, we started this wonderful endeavor of doing what's called the R&R Marketplace under that umbrella, and that is
Okay.
yeah, it's a 5-pillar model. So we repurposed a old grocery store plaza. So it was a 90,000 square foot grocery store plaza that we repurposed into a 5-pillar model that includes early child education, entrepreneurship is here. So we have uh, an innovation center that houses entrepreneurs, and then there's also a workforce development component. A bank is here on the ground with us. Eventually, our church will be here on the ground with us. That's also one of the pillars. And then we have these sustainability partners that also work with us, that lease from us. They are a restaurant. Of course, our banking partner leases from us, and then a behavioral health center and a pharmacy. And so that's what we're on the ground with right now.
Great.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the relationship between the church and R&R Marketplace.
Yeah. So the church is one of the pillars, of course, in the R&R marketplace, in this whole physical on the ground makeup. But one of the things that we knew of why the church had to be a pillar in this project, which is sometimes quite often not included. So a lot of times the church doesn't get included. Like you have this perfect pest model where people include the political arena, they go with government, they go with schools, but the church usually gets left out of the scenario. And so, what we realize is that the church is it's one of the greatest deployment centers of all time. And so, she's not matched by anyone when it comes to humans or human capital or people
Mhm.
resources. And so, we thought it was really important that when we started this endeavor, that the church be a huge part of what was taking place. And so she is that. She is a deployment center. She's a resource. She's always available. What did it say? Rain or shine, she's there. And so so we have grown to understand more, probably more so now than when we first started, the importance of the pillar of the church.
Beverly, I'm just like, that phrase is gonna stick with me, the greatest deployment center of all time. I mean, like,
Mm.
how would the world change if the church started thinking of itself in that way? Um,
Yeah.
that's really gonna stick with me. Thank you for that.
Mm.
I was struck by Reverend Jasmine Smothers' comment, that we should have a vision so big that without God, it's bound to fail. When you step on the property of R&R Marketplace,
Yeah.
it's almost overwhelming.
Mhm.
And, like, I'm not one to shy away from a challenge myself, but, like, that's that's big. I mean,
Yeah.
tell us
Yeah.
about biting off such a big chunk and
Mm.
what was behind that for you? Tell us.
I always say I got tricked by God. Like if I think if we had known at the beginning all the things that went into this, I'm not sure if I think that's why he shows us the end of a thing right before he tells us to write the vision and make it plain, but I think he always shows us the end of a thing to keep us encouraged as we're journeying. And one of the things that really has been, I think, most impressive to us has been the people who have rallied around this work. We basically really literally like wrote the vision and shared it, and we kept saying we're looking for God partners, and so that was always a goal. We're like, okay, we're going to go out here, we're going to share the vision, and whoever bites, or whoever decides that hey, this is a worthy vision and we really want to get involved. But we had so many people, and I always say this is that if we could write the names on the walls of all the people that have been involved in this last 11 years, we wouldn't have room in all
Mhm.
this 90,000 square foot space. And so it definitely was. I think that quote says it all. Is that when we didn't come up with this, so I think I have to make sure that we give credit to where credit is due. Like this really is it's a prophetic vision from God that we felt like we didn't have a choice. I don't feel like I had a choice but to continue to finish the assignment. And so once we started, it just was like a snowball. It's like, okay, there are these things that have to take place. And we had all these miraculous moments, of course, along the way where there was certain funding because this project, we started off and our budget was like 7.5 million. And once we got into it, we realized that me and my husband we didn't know what we were doing. So we were like, the budget was all wrong. So, so we finally got
Oh,
developers,
boy.
finally got construction going, and finally got, all those components started coming together. It ended up being almost an $18 million
Wow.
investment into this region. And we're not finished. That's just phase one. So we haven't finished phase two yet, which is the larger, one of the larger buildings on the lot, which would be the last building that we'll finish. But like you said, I think it's kind of like what the quote is that it's without God, this is really impossible. Like it is
Mhm.
impossible. about God. And so we definitely are the picture for any of your listeners. Like, we're the picture of grassroots. Like, we started with, I always say our nonprofit started with negative nothing. Like, we were in the red, making a decision at the beginning of whether or not we're going to keep our nonprofit and just, or let it go and just focus on the church. And so when God dropped this vision in our lap, we were like, okay, well, we have to give this a go and see if, this is really of God or if it's not. And so, of course, we see that it really has been the Lord's work.
Beverly, is there one story that like comes to mind where you were, like I like to say sometimes, I feel like I'm screaming into the wind and nobody's listening, where you felt very tangibly the presence and the intervention of God?
Yeah. Yeah, we've got quite a few of those. And I know that this particular one spans around the need of of funding. Like, nonprofits are notorious. We always need funds. There's no way around it, right? So, but this particular time, we were desperately in need because we were at a crossroads. So we're doing this project, and we have what's called a new market tax credit capital stack, and in that, if you can't close on your new markets, then basically you jeopardize the entire project because you have to bring your whole budget to bear. And so we were about $2 million shy of being able to bring our budget to bear. And I never forget, we put an all out assault in prayer. We were like, hey, Thursday mornings we're going to pray. Monday mornings we prayed. Tuesday mornings we prayed. And we just basically were like, we're laying this before you, Lord. If this is really you and we really are following the work that you've called us into, then you'll provide. And miraculously, literally, I never forget, it was this older lady and her attorney called and said, we want to look at building. We just want to see what you all are doing. And at that time, there's no construction. So it was wintertime. So because she was probably in her 70s, we were like, gosh, she's going to be out here in the cold. So we plugged up this makeshift heater, set it up, had this cute table. We bought in little chairs and, so she could come and have a place to sit. And because there's nothing to show her, but vacancy at that time. And she sat down and she said, so what are you going to do here? Like, and she literally had no idea like what we were going to do here. And she says, what are you going to do here? And we were like, well, we're going to do blah, blah, blah. And she fell in love with the idea of early childhood education. And so we were like, we're putting in an emotionally responsive early childhood education center to raise up, our smallest ones, from really like cooking right from scratch. We're like, these little ones are gonna get a chance to kind of grow up in this environment that's loving and emotionally responsive to them and their families. And she fell in love with that. And anyway, I never forget the question. Her attorney turns to us and says, how much is it going to cost to build that? And at that time, we knew the numbers were around about 1.75 million. So we were like, hey, it's going to cost about 1.75 for us to build the Early Childhood Learning Center, to finish the capital stack for that piece of it. And she was like, oh, okay. Anyway, literally, when I say literally, I mean almost less than 24 hours, her attorney sent us an email and says, this young lady is going to give you all 1.75 million to finish that piece of the property. And we were like, you gotta be kidding me. And she says, and the wire is on its way. We're going to go ahead and wire the funds, send us all the information to wire now. And wired 1.75 million in less than 24 hours.
Wow.
And so it's just been the grace of God, like all those things. And we just, of course, we cried and we looked at the bank account a million times and looked like this really happened. Like this really took place. Because I mean, how many times do you hear of somebody giving you almost $2 million that doesn't know you? They don't know you. And so it was just a miraculous moment.
Uh-huh. Such a God thing. I mean, that's the kind of thing where we say, oh, that's the Holy Spirit at work in people's hearts.
Yeah.
And in that vision that you had.
Yeah.
That's a story of kind of how you closed the gap. I want to come back around to kind of the front end and say, you had this vision, you began to work with construction folks who took it from 7.5 to 18 million, which I'm sure blew your minds. And there's a part of you saying, what are we thinking? But what about those very first steps when that feels completely insurmountable? Like, who were maybe your first partners, your first encouragers? Where did you get the financial resources. I know there's some,
Yeah.
you described some, tax credits, some,
Yeah. Yeah. And that all came later. You're right. It really started from people. So of
mhm,
course, and when I say, everything starts from people, but, um, people buying into the vision and saying that they believed, in what we were really expressing had to take place. And so it was more about the vision that was, I think they kind of caught fire in people. They were like, this is something that I haven't seen before. And what I mean by that is that they were looking at it like, we've seen the social service kind of entities kind of come in and kind of take over when it comes to communities that are like low to moderate income. And our model was more around what happens when a people takes charge of their own lives,
mm,
and the brilliance in that community begins to shine and outshine the darkness that was kind of hovering. That's saying that, like, oh,
mm,
it's nothing here, or kind of like what they said to Jesus, right? Can anything good come out of, Nazareth? Like, is there anything
mhm,
good that can come out of that space? And so I think that they became bright eyed as well. Like, they were like, oh, wow, like this is something that we have not really, we've seen people serve people. And I never forget, one of the things we always would say to people is that we're not here to help. And they would go, what does that mean? And we meant it in the way of that when you say help, it often means that you're here and they need to be brought up to some space that you're at.
mhm,
Um, and we were like, we're getting away from all of that language, that we're here basically only to open up access to the opportunities that should have been in this community already. And
mhm,
that was, I think, the funders, the donors, the people. So we had people who were giving $5 a month. We had people who were saying like, "Hey, I want to be a
wow,
part of this." We had people who were giving $20,000. So we're giving 100,000. So we had all of these kind of eclectic minds coming together, and that's even how our board came together. So we had corporate executives who were saying like, "I want to be a part of this. How do I become a part of making this work?" And of course, we were very intentional about making sure our board was very community centric. And of course, we needed that corporate mindset. And, like I said, the perfect pest model. We needed the government. We needed all these pieces to come together. And we, of course, the church. So our board is made up of all those components. And a lot of the corporate people were very much already indoctrinated with how to fundraise. And so that wasn't really our wheelhouse. And so we learned from them, like, what does it look like to actually go after foundation funds? Or what does it look like to actually go after grant funding that we normally would have never looked at? We would never in our right minds looked at a grant that was worth $3 million and tried to go get it. Like, we would have been like, no, what about the 10,000 or what? So all this iron sharpening iron was taking place in the front
nice.
end,
Wow.
and just really blessing us, as an organization.
Mm. Wow. Beverly, can you talk to us about location?
Mhm.
You are in a part of Missouri that has really, really felt the brunt of broken systems, racial injustice, white supremacy, and um, how has being on the edge of Ferguson impacted the way you think about your work, the way you do your work, and the way that your work has manifested itself?
Yeah. Gosh, that's such a big question. That's like a big question. It's so we of course we started our three tagline words were equity, reconciliation, and transformation. And so we believe that equity is what brings about, of course, reconciliation. And then that equity then feeds reconciliation, reconciliation then feeds this transformation that can take place in community. And those hard conversations were being had on the front end, and they were hard. They were very difficult because Missouri is definitely a state that is it's definitely a show me state. So when it comes to how can I put this? When it comes to the backing, I'll per se, like, so for instance, we got a lot of questions in the beginning. I never forget, like, a lot of the questions that would come to us would be like, well, who's a part of this? As if it was not necessarily good enough on its own or on its own merit or its own standing. And a lot of those questions were coming to me and my husband, like, well, who's leading this? And we were like, we're leading this. And so in this area, we had a lot of barriers to overcome when it came to educating people on what equity really looks like. Um, and that just because you live in a community that is wealthy, you're not coming to this community to add to this community what you may think you know, or what relative information you may have. You probably will learn more from community here than what you may even feel like you're resourcing the community with. And so there's a lot of educational pieces that took place in the very beginning when it comes to um, just mindsets. And even when it comes to just simple questions like I said, like who's actually running this. And so we knew from the very beginning that if we had put a white male at the front of the helm, we would have probably raised all of our capital in the first year. But it took us 11 years, 7 years to purchase the building, to raise our capital. And then, yeah, of course, now we're in the building now, but this has been an 11-year journey. And so there's definitely all those different components that we've learned over this time frame, and then also had to teach. And so my husband was doing our what's called a racial reconciliation Bible study, and so a lot of the people who came on board to actually help um, came out of that racial reconciliation Bible study that he was doing. Our developer came out of that
Right.
reconciliation Bible study that happened during all the Ferguson unrest, and everybody was kind of scrambling, like, well, we want to be involved, we don't know how to be involved, we don't know how to get um, how to help, how to be a part of, how to assist in any kind of way. And so he started this Bible study. He was asked to start this Bible study. He was very reluctant to do it. He was like, my husband's from Gary, Indiana, by the way. So he's from Gary, Indiana, predominantly, when I say predominantly Black, I mean like 99.9999% Black
Mm.
community, and with maybe a speckle of Hispanic population. And that's, very rare there too. But he just was like, I don't know if I really feel like I want to teach a reconciliation Bible study. He's just like, shouldn't people have already read their own history and their own books and figured out how, to think about this? And so anyway, but he went ahead and did it reluctantly. And a lot of those friendships, matter of fact, all of those friendships and all those relationships, we started going to dinner at each other's houses. We started having dinner out with one another, and we started having these conversations. And like I said in the beginning, they weren't easy conversations because there was a lot of ignorance around Black culture, around who Black people really are. Most of it was based on what you see on TV. And we were like, you cannot have gotten your science about Black people from TV. Like that couldn't be just where you got that from. But yeah, so it was a very interesting time. So the region that we're in, Delwood sits in the heart of Ferguson. So on each side of Delwood is Ferguson, Missouri, and
Ah,
and so when you think about, and Delwood, really interestingly enough, is a very stable community. It's a small community, but it's a very stable community. They own their homes, and it's only a small population of about 5,000 who are in Delwood. Their mayor is absolutely incredible. He's done an incredible job of bringing investment back to this community, and so which has um, helped Ferguson as well when it comes to investment. So Ferguson, people would know it now if they drove through, like even the area where Michael Brown was hurt. There's so much that has taken place on the corridor that's been a blessing without gentrifying the community. So there's been so many things that have been reinvested in the community that have been a blessing.
nice.
Beverly, could you help our listeners understand why having a pharmacy in R&R Marketplace is so important?
Mhm. Yeah, I think first of all, because all the Walgreens closed. So we have literally lost every CVS, every Walgreens in probably a maybe 5 mile radius. Like we don't have, and it might be a little bit over that. So I live about maybe 7 miles or 8 miles up the road, and so that's the nearest Walgreens is where I live, and so all of the pharmacies are gone. Um, and we have no real understanding as to why, because they definitely were utilized. It wasn't like this is not a community, and we all know that when you're in an LMI community, the first place that people are utilizing is pharmacy. Pharmacy is a big deal in low to moderate income communities. And and even the resources that wrap around that. So for instance, some people use Walgreens as a way or means, sadly, for groceries. So when they're in food
Mm.
deserts, you have Walgreens has, snacks and food or bread, things that people can purchase and pick up. And so those are closed. And so having this pharmacy here, it's named RX Outreach. They're changing their name now to Delwood Community Pharmacy to be more community friendly so that people understand that this is home for them and that they're putting
Mm.
roots there on purpose. And so it's very important. It is probably um, one of the most important, I think, pieces for them to be here.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Mhm.
I'd love to hear a story of someone who has been part of R&R. A story, obviously protect
Yeah.
names and folks however you need to, but someone who's experienced the ministry and been impacted by what you're doing.
Yeah. It's a young lady who actually she's usually the first person that comes to my mind. I just want to give you a picture of her. She's absolutely gorgeous. She's a beautiful young lady and her spirit as well. We first met her, she would became a part of our church first. She wouldn't lift her head up. She just was very broken, and we didn't know why. We just kinda kept loving on her, and she didn't give hugs, like, we're a hugging church, and so we were like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And she was like, You can back off with all that, that extra stuff y'all doing." But anyway, we just kept loving on her and talking to her, and eventually she ended up in what is called one of our cohorts, Employ St. Louis cohort. And we deal with a lot of we do soft skills training in our employment training cohort. And in this cohort, the young lady who runs it, her name is Shonda Gray. She's incredible. She's an incredible director for Employ St. Louis. And she starts off the class with dealing with roadblocks because we just feel like that if you don't get to the heart of the reason why people have a hard time with work or have a hard time with promotion on work, then you kind of have wasted their time. You know what I mean? We just discovered that. Anyway, she was dealing with the roadblocks, and the young lady in the class, she says, "What are your goals when it comes to being able to finish this?" And she says, "I just want to be able to hold my head up. I want to be able to speak in public, and I want to be able to make six figures in my income. Those are my three goals." And so, Shonda, of course, as sweet as she was like, "You can do all those things. You can do that and more." But what we found out is this young lady, her 9-year-old daughter was actually killed during the Ferguson unrest. And so
Mm.
she was shot through the house. So someone randomly shot through their house and shot her and killed her daughter. And we
Mm.
had no idea that this is what, she had been burdened by, for such a long period of time. Well, anyway, at the end of the cohort, she went through the Employ St. Louis cohort, and you could see her just blossoming and brightening up, and so Shonda asked her would she be the speaker for the graduating class, and she was like, "Me?" So anyway, she ended up, of course, her chin, I always say like in degrees, like she went from the 90 degree, to finally, we could see her face. And she spoke at the graduation, and I never forget it. In about a 6-month span, just her self-esteem and her heart for God started to shift. And she also let us know that her next promotion, she ended up with her six figures. And so we're just
Wow.
grateful to have been a small part, of her story, and to see her smile now, is absolutely, it lights up a room. I wish I could put a picture up of her, but that's probably one of the greatest things that we've ever seen take place in a person who's come through anything that we've been able to put out there.
Mm.
Glory be.
Yeah.
Wow.
Beautiful.
What a great
Yeah.
What do
story.
you imagine for the next decade for R&R?
Mm. So hopefully this is Beverlyology, right? This is my succession plan is that I will in 10 years no longer be the CEO, and there'll be another CEO here, and that I will be on the road, hopefully setting these up in other cities. And so
Hmm.
that is the goal, is to make this a model in other communities, and preferably, not preferably, I'll say our first goal is to really put it into rural communities. I'm from a rural, small town, and I feel like in my heart, I'm like, rural America could use some some arms and some more community, because we think that this is the fastest way to build community. This model builds community like quickly, like it just builds it fast, and so we just think that it doesn't necessarily have to be a low to moderate income community. It could be a wealthy community. We believe if you set this model in any community, because it's not just built for low to moderate income people, it's built for community, and so we believe it would outlast any space.
Hmm. That's amazing. I'm thinking that a lot of the folks who are listening to our conversation are looking at buildings that are empty, thinking about the future of the church. We're really at this pivot point in our country with institutions that have long served us. If you could think back to 20 years ago, Beverly,
Mm.
and you could say a few things to her from your perspective now, like what would be your words of wisdom?
Mm. I think that 20 years ago, the woman that I was a big dreamer even 20 years ago, and I think I would tell her to start. Don't
Mm,
wait. I think that I spent a lot of time pondering 20 years ago, as opposed to just jumping and going ahead and going for it, and trusting the God in me. 20 years ago, I had probably just given my life to Christ. I probably maybe 5 or 6 years in. Um, so I would definitely tell her, go. That you got the best thing you can have. The Holy Spirit's living on the inside. You can really do it. You can really do it. You can go. And that's sometimes the roughest piece is to actually just step out and begin.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about the Great Commission and Jesus said, "Go."
Yeah.
I mean, go. Make
Right.
disciples. Do your thing.
Yeah.
Don't
Amen.
wait. Don't wait. Take those first steps.
Mhm.
Believe in the power of the Holy Spirit. Believe in yourself and the gifts that God has given you. And
Amen.
I know it's real that it's 20 years later and you've had this amazing ministry. And that didn't happen overnight.
Mm.
That was tenacity and courage and trusting in God's presence and leading. And so, what a faithful soul you are. I really thank you.
So kind.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. Yeah. Okay, we have last question that we are asking all of our guests this season, and it's based on the Isaiah passage. Do not consider the things of old.
Mm.
Uh, for I am doing a new thing. It springs forth. Do you not perceive it? And so, what is an old thing that we need to not be considering right now? We just need to be letting go of. And what is a new thing you see God doing?
Yeah. So I'll start with the new thing I see God doing, and that is I see the church really, not from a religious perspective, but the church is really springing forward. Like her voice is
Mm.
getting stronger, and she is recognizing that it doesn't matter um, my gender in the church. It doesn't matter all those space, all these things that have kind of kept us a little trapped. I believe that she's just springing forth. She's just started. Like I think she's warming up, and they say she's about to blow. Like she's really like getting out there and saying like don't discount us. Like
Mm.
don't sleep on us. Like we really have the answers, and we can help. Like we are a big part of the solutions, and I see that like that people are awakening to that we are the church. Of course, we already know it's not a building. We gather in spaces, right? But I find the church everywhere I go. Like I mean, I was just at Disney World, and I'm like talking to people, you can see the excitement, in the church's eyes. That's like yeah, like
Mm.
we're able to mobilize now. One of the things that I think that we really could let go of is this idea that we have to conform to an ideology first before we actually work together. We need to get away from that. The factors that are wrapped around like what is condemning, that's God's business. You know what I mean? Like I just feel like it's just time for us to get away from this idea that has kept us, like I said, trapped, whether it's gender, whether it's, whether it's race, whether it's, because there's so many different things that have caused us to kind of like wall off from one another, whether it's sexuality, all of that. It's like none of that really, all of this stuff that we deal with on the outside, that's God's business. And the stuff that we need to be doing is figuring out how do we actually come together and fulfill the work that God has called us all to, not one worker. It's like now it does seem like we're getting away from this idea of superstar preachers too, like this idea that one person carries the mantle and we all just kind of follow blindly behind them, but it's like now you see these ministries, these works that just people are just saying like, hey, I'm just going to get going. And other people are having to catch up later. They're like, okay, they're gone. They're down the street. They're already building down there, and they didn't wait on permission. And so I think that's one of the things that we definitely need to get rid of in the church is that I think we're kind of through with asking permission, that we're just going to go ahead and do it.
Love
Goes
it.
right along with go.
Go.
Right?
Love it.
Love it. Oh, thank you for being with us today, Beverly. Thank you for your ministry and your heart and your courage and your leadership.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.